welcome to this week's review, the latest episode of the My Hero Academia Vigilantes anime. Goodbye to Dan, and we kick off this review, as always, doing these reviews by talking about the positives and the headline positives, the big things I discuss over the course of this video. The animation was frankly great, the musical sequences were fun, and I think it adapted the source material well. Now, I know that I often talk about how much I love the animation with this series, and I have to say is that I've really turned around on it. Leading into this season, leading up to it with all the trailers and the promotional material, I was worried because it seemed to be going for an animation style and an art direction that I wasn't sure was really going to work with this series, given just how, well, weird and strange and wonderful it can be. But you know what? I'm quite happy to eat my words. It's been a wonderful experience, and I think there are certainly sequences within this episode which were brilliantly well put together, though there's a couple issues here and there which I'll discuss later on in the video. But like I say, I think the animation here is just top-notch and fantastic. The action sequences that we get towards the end of the episode, particularly when we see Knuckle Duster and Bee having their big final confrontation, that went way better than I was expecting it to. I would like to say that was something that was brilliantly well adapted from the source material. I will admit, I don't remember it looking as good as that, I should say, in the source material, but still, just that whole fight itself was just brilliant. It showed the sheer weight of desperation that existed within the mind of Bee in that moment. How we had both of these fighters that felt like they were on the absolute last legs now, having to make this final last stand in the hope that maybe, just maybe, they'll get to the other side of this one. Though at this point, as the host of Bee, the Bee Parasite, was saying that, you know, at this point, the subject's body is kind of dying and decaying a little bit, so, you know, there is definitely a ticking clock element there as far as, you know, whether or not Knuckle Duster would actually save the day there and save his daughter. Just the whole episode itself, just that cat and mouse game that we had from the prior episode into this one, of Knuckle Duster and Bee trying to get around one and each other and try and find a way in dealing that deadly blow, that final last strike that's going to save the day in their point of view, was great to end up seeing. Just the way that it was all put together, that chase sequence we'll get towards the start of the episode, where we have that transitional moment where you go from PopStep walking onto stage to then Bee running for her life, was brilliant, with just Knuckle Duster there swinging on the rope like bloody Spider-Man going after her. Someone who is a hero from a certain point of view, acting in a way which is intimidating and scary, in a way which we don't really see within the main series, for obvious reasons, because their heroes are just more universally and more objectively good for the most part. So to have this almost subversion where we're seeing this heroic character being shown in such a, well, it's not an overtly dark way or an overtly sinister way, but there is a sinisterness there to them because of how they're drawn and how they're going into this. We know that he's still the same guy, and there's been no subversion of expectation. There's been no twisty with the character that's about to reveal actually was secretly an arsehole all along, but you get the understanding here, just the way that he's drawn throughout this and the previous episode. When we get into this fight sequence, there is this manic-driven, almost feralness to him as he's trying to save the day, and that is great. It really does show the character that he has, as well as that he being something that is reflected to a degree or another within Bee, though there's always been a more feral creepiness to Bee that we've had long established in prior episodes. The episode itself, or rather I should say the animation itself more generally, still had a flair to it, which made it enjoyable to watch. I remember that, and this, I suppose this is something I should really talk later on in the episode, but I will just say is that this series of events, I think, has been done here far better than it was in the manga, even though at the same point, you know, it's pretty much exactly what happened in the manga, though the events are slightly different. Yes, there's some differences that we'll discuss shortly, but it all comes together to create a far more dynamic and visually interesting series of events, which I'm not sure I totally appreciated within the manga form. But a lot of the issues that I had with the manga, particularly at this point, is that it felt like you had a lot of characters that were just standing around and not really doing much of a muchness, which we don't have. We don't have that, and part of that is due to the musical sequence, which is fun. I don't want to take anything away because I do think it's a lot of fun, and it is the kind of goofiness I do enjoy with this series. And I don't want this to end up sounding like damning with faint praise or something that I'm being critical of the series of, but it is something that I I love just how odd and different and strange this series can end up being, because let's just boil the whole musical dance sequence of PopStep, the two of them, just down to what they are. You know, take away the flair and the performance side of things. The first sequence, the first dance sequence, the first song sequence, comes after Crawler, after falling off the sodding wall, brings PopStep her microphone thing, and this leads to her singing a song which, you know, I don't know how it'll be in the dub, but certainly within the subtitle version, it's very obvious that that is a song which is about Crawler. Something that Crawler... There's no reaction shot with Crawler, so he's just watching that and just clapping his hands going, ha ha, fun times, fun times. Once again, not realising the full extent of what she's singing about there. So you have that whole sequence of events of, it is once again, although it does not need underlining, that she does have this affection for Crawler, and this is her doing her best to explain that, to present that, to express that. She can't express it when she's her normal self, so she's expressing it under the persona of PopStep. She is using her fake persona to do something that the real version of herself could never do, which is why Stain would probably love to kill her. Because that's his conclusion with all of this, but that's a whole other discussion. But still, she uses the persona of PopStep to express herself, and that is something that I think does go further into the psychology as to why she is PopStep and why she does what she's doing. She's doing it for attention. She's doing it to be seen, to be something that is more than herself, to be someone that is more remarkable, which you can again also make the argument with Crawler as well. The second dance sequence that we get is, of course, with them singing this more poppy, dancier version of a bordering on Eurovision quality version of the supermarket jingle. And of course you have to have the little corporate bit with the shop's owner doing the we really believe in the youth, and we believe that they're our future, and we're going to be here for another 100 years. Ah! Just, you had to get that in, and it's just this, the reason I think it's beautifully, stupidly, goofingly endearing. Like, there's a almost twisted humour that I get from it, because I suppose from a writing point of view, because in the life story of PopStep, this is, up until this moment, the single most important moment in her life. And I will be honest, the way that they do it here really makes up for something that I had an issue with the source material. Without going too far into it, and you can look at my review from around this time within the manga, a big issue that I had is that I felt as though that PopStep didn't really get much of a rounding off moment in this bit. That maybe she should have been the one to confront or defeat or to deal with the Eel Monster, because that Eel Monster guy ultimately represented a darker side of idol culture, of pop culture. That really nasty, slimy, simpy area of it. And he was the living embodiment of that, reluctantly given the circumstances of that character, but he was a metaphor, and as such, her overcoming that would end up showing her becoming the next stage of herself, a better side of herself, a more evolved and refined version of herself, right? However, the way that they do things here is it makes this moment the big, major moment instead of that. There's a part of me that still thinks that maybe she should have been the one to confront the Eel Monster guy, but this whole sequence, this bit where they're singing this supermarket jingle, is effectively doing something similar. This is her rounding off moment. This is the moment where she can be PopStep well and truly. That she can really lay into this better side of herself. That she can really be the more heroic, truer version of herself. She is going a level beyond. She's going plus ultra in a way which, yes, is very mundane and very ordinary, but for her in her life story is extraordinary. We get it explained to us and shown to us in this episode when she's trying to talk to the crowd and she's trying to banter with them and talk to them, and how nervous she is, and about, oh, it feels like I need to go to the bathroom, ha 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 ha, oh no, no one's laughing, oh dear, and just the nervousness that is all around all of that. We see that, and then it transitions into her evolving to become this better version of herself, this truer version of herself, and that is great. We see this evolution of her character just from this episode alone. From someone that's more nervous and unsure to someone that's far more confident in themselves. Of course, similar to moments that we see in the main series with Bakugo and other characters, we're not quite at the moment where they will make the full tilt into being the truer, better version of themselves. Certainly not in terms of this story, because we're effectively only at the end of the first season, but still, it shows her evolution, almost in line with the music itself. The first song that she sings is very improvised. It's something playing off her little cassette recorder speaker thing. And the next time she sings, it's a larger production, with all these people supporting her and cheering her on, and her becoming, again, this better source of herself, this better sequence of herself. And the absurdity of it all comes in, because this major emotional landmark moment in her life is being done for a supermarket jingle. Like, in the context of this universe, in the context of this world, or to bring it into more in line with our world, you know that the reality of this is that that sequence, all that singing, is going to be on countless TikToks and YouTube shorts. It's going to be trending on their version of X and Twitter and all that stuff. And the people running the supermarket will be rubbing their hands with glee, going, ha ha ha, we're getting a level of engagement we never had before. Oh, we're reaching a whole new demographic now. And that's the absurdity of it, that this magical, wonderful moment, this landmark moment in this character's life is ultimately done for the most cynical and capitalistic of endeavours. It's just singing a supermarket jingle in front of a crowd, and yet it's one of the most endearing and wholesome and nice things that I've seen in the entire series. Not just this one, but the main one, because it is something that is so identifiable. It's someone overcoming stage fright. It's someone becoming a better and more confident version of themselves. They won't quite get all the way there, certainly not from this one event, but this itself ends up adding that extra layer to it, which makes it more than just a goofy little moment where they sing a theme song in a very good way. It ends up becoming something that's a lot more meaningful, and I do love that fact. And to round off the positives, I know this is going to be a shorter review, but this is certainly one of those cases where it does feel like, what else do you say other than it was bloody wonderful? The other major thing that I'll say is that I think this episode adapted its source material well. In fact, I would go so far as to say that I think this adaptation, at least this episode, is better than the source material because of how it's able to really play into the moment. This is not to take away from the source material, and anyone who has not read it, I would recommend at least reading the first 4 volumes of it, because at least then you'll have read pretty much everything that's happened thus far in the series, but a different take on it. As much as I enjoy it, and I will be resuming my reviews of the manga in a couple weeks' time, I think that this did it better because it was able to really play into the moment. That it was able to create a moment that we did not have in the source material. A moment that really gave PopStep, at this moment in the story, more of a time to shine and more of an opportunity to become this better version of herself. This still exists in the source material, don't get me wrong. This is not something that's created solely for the anime. But the fact it's animated and adapted in this specific way makes it feel stronger. And on a more visceral level, when we have the chase sequence and the action sequence that we have with Bee and Knuckle Duster, it's a similar kind of feeling. That he is taking the source material and is able to present it in a way that you could never do in a manga format. Not without radically changing how it is put together or how it's drawn. Don't get me wrong, I do love the manga and I do love its art style, but this was able to do things differently. It was able to present more of a cat and mouse struggle between Bee and Knuckle Duster more so than there was before. In the manga, it felt more like a fight in a dark alleyway, which, yes, it still technically is, and yes, it doesn't take away from it, but here it's presented in a way that there's a lot more of a give and take with everything. And again, I will just say, because I think it's a bloody wonderful moment, the fact that we were able to, with the source material and just presenting it in a different way, give PopStep more of an emotional a crescendo moment in her life story at the end of this first season than it felt as though we got towards the end of the, quote, first season of the manga. And of course there's the other alteration that we have here where Knuckle Duster is talking to, and I forget their name for that. I think it's Tamo or something like that from the main series, who is the fixer guy that was, well, not fixer. He's more of a fence. He's more of a go-between for the League of Vigilants and other villain groups. That in the manga, their conversation is done more in the form of a phone call. Here it's presented differently. It's both of them meeting up in a cafe and just talking over each other's shoulders, as you'd expect to see in a crime drama or in some kind of espionage thriller thing. It's standard stuff, but I think it is stuff that's still done very well. It ends up changing the nature of the conversation, and it ends up leaning into more of the fact that Knuckle Duster is in this very grey area that Crawl isn't in at the moment and Bee isn't in. I think that with this series, there is always the risk that you don't show a lot of difference between the heroes and the vigilantes. Yes, they ultimately want the same things, but the vigilantes exist in that darker, more shadowy area. They're going to meet in with and working alongside people who have darker intent sometimes, or at least in the context of law enforcement and law and justice, and this ends up playing into that, and it isn't just something done over the case of a phone. It is something that is done live, it's something that's done in a moment and presented in such a way that, this is something that's true in the original source material itself, that there is still a history behind these two characters. And I love the way that it is all put together. Again, it is the darker, murkier side of it. On a similar note, let us get into the negatives. And the big negative, one of the major negatives I will have, is that I think the visuals in this week's episode were too dark. And I mean that literally more so than figuratively. The slightly darker, more twisted nature of Bee and all the violence there, not much of a muchness. I think it does it well. There's a part of me that wishes there was something a little more creepier and sinister and more feral when they started getting injected with the trigger and the other quirk thing. I think that could have been done a little bit better. But for me, the big issue is that the visuals for most of the episode were too dark, literally. I tried playing this on different monitors, and each one of them, it was dark. The visuals were dark and murky in a way which it doesn't quite take away from all the visuals, as I still think there's a lot to be enjoyed here. But still, there's certain shots and reaction shots where I think, you know, if this was presented slightly differently, if the lighting in the scene had been slightly differently, it could have cast a very different look in certain moments. Like, as I said previously, we got the moment where Knuckle Duster is swinging after Bee, and we have this, I know I've said the phrase multiple times, this cat and mouse thing of him pursuing after, and him having this manic, always twisted grin on his face. And I think that a couple shots of light just tracing across his face, or a little bit of rim lighting or something to create more of an intimidating presence for him, I think would have added something into that. Oh, he's still the same hero, or rather the same vigilante we all know and love, but I think that would have created more of a visual image than we necessarily got. The other negative that I have is that this is an episode which... Right, this is an episode that reintroduces the Delivery Man, or the Scarred Man, I think is the more canon name for them at this point in the story. I refer to them as the Delivery Man because that's how they're dressed and that's how they're presented in the manga at this point. At this point in the manga, this was our first time seeing them. And knowing that there was now this other element, this other aspect, this other entity that's involved in all of this had a shock value to it. Oh, sure, I knew that there was going to be manga and volume after this, so there had to be other villains and bad guys. But this guy, I didn't know what their deal was or how they connected into it. They could well have just been some mook, someone who literally was a delivery man in the context of whatever criminal organisation that is going on here. Here, we don't have that because we see them earlier on in the season, a moment which ultimately I don't think has paid off. I still think that using the salaryman rather than the delivery man to distribute Trigger would have been a lot more visually interesting thing, for reasons I'll discuss in the season review in a few weeks' time. But we also get the thing, I think that in the... I'm sure someone correctly, but in the manga, I don't think we see him using his quirk in this moment. Or if it is, it's something I don't remember or misread or misremembered. So we have this big moment where they're being reintroduced and it feels as though we're playing our hand here. Like, we already know that they are a villainous character by virtue of the fact we saw them in the first episode. Now they're back, and now we get an idea as to what their quirk is. Potentially. It's kind of hard to say, but we'll go from with. Again, I think that the foreshadowing with them from earlier in the season could have been handled better. Again, this is something I might well discuss in the season review. But I think that, I don't know, maybe had they done more of him, it might have taken something away from Bee and Knuckle Duster's situation. But with all that said, let us get into the overview and just say that I think this is a great episode. I would be fine if this season just ended here, because I think this is a nice, strong ending. But I understand why it isn't, because I know what's coming in the next episode. And I think that does make for a stronger ending, though it does feel weird that we are doing the first 4 volumes and the first first 2 episodes of the 5th volume. How that's going to weigh out for future volumes, I don't know, but still, we'll see how it goes. So with that said and done, however, let's get into Comment Corner! It's time for Comment Corner, and once again, I forgot to reply to a comment on the previous video. Apologies. Things have been very difficult for me as of late. Things are starting to settle down now, thankfully. Well, that said, however, let's get to Big X1, who says, I don't want to jinx it after the way that the Doctor Who season turned out, but I think they could nail this. Thank you for your comment, and I could understand being apprehensive, because that was... well, I suppose from my point of view, it was just an inevitability that things are going to turn out that way. But I am happy that things this week certainly feel as though they have landed. I know that this... no, I was going to say I know this series isn't for everyone, but at this point, for anyone who didn't like it, they've switched off. There's not that many people that hate watch series like this. I know that's become a thing now where we just need to have week after week after week of content creators, because they are definitely content creators on YouTube with the videos of the character of whichever series it is with laser beams pointing out their eyes and steam come out their ears of the, oh no, whatever series is, it's done for, this is a point of no return. Has this series jumped the shark? You know, I haven't seen anything like that. I'm sure that if there are people that dislike it, well, there's probably going to be a 5 or 6 hour long video essay in the next couple of weeks discussing why they don't like it. Not that I'm going to bother watching it, because even if I've shared that opinion, I'm not watching a 5 or 6 hour long fucking video essay. Certainly not for a TV series I don't like. In any case, let me know what you thought about this particular episode. We are getting into, well, next week will be the final episode of the season, so start to have a bit of a think as to what you feel about this season overall. I will be doing my season-long review, and I will be reading comments when we get to that. But in any case, thank you all for watching, thank you all for listening, and see you next time. Goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!